Gigi reading in the introduction of FoodWISE, and I look at Twinkies tonight and highlight a few news articles for us. So I start with where we ended off last time, but what actually goes into making that food? Take Twinkies. An extreme example, as profiled in Steve Etlinger's sobering and at times delightful Twinkie Deconstructed, my journey to discover how the ingredients found in processed foods are grown, mined, parentheses, yes, mined, and manipulated into what America eats. Etlinger traces the journey Twinkies take to get to our plates as a way of getting us to think about scale in the manufacture of processed foods. Etlinger describes the 8-mile-long conveyor belts and towering tanks used in Twinkie ingredient transport, tanks so heavily constructed for the transport of chlorine that some of the steel is 1.5 inches thick. The containers hold mold-fighting sorbic acid, as well as petroleum-derived and naturally derived colors, turmeric from the tuber of a plant grown in Kerala, India, and cochineal derived from the desiccated female cochineal insect collected from dryland plantations of prickly pear cacti. Then there's vitamins, and Etlinger describes how most of the world's niacin comes from Visp, Switzerland, from a liquid petroleum gas, naphtha, and petrochemical plant. More big tubes, towers, giant tanks, catwalks, and ladders. More important than the look of such big scale are the resources that are corralled to produce the sweet treat. Mountains are literally moved to mine all these chemicals. So what's in your Twinkie? A lot of resources, a lot of labor, and very little whole food. This may be an extreme example, but the list of ingredients added to processed foods are impressively large. If we want to keep our mountains intact and limit our petroleum consumption, does that mean we have to go non-processed all the way? Not at all. There are alternatives to mined powders and hefty amounts of distillates that are used to preserve food at home, but also commercially. Throughout time, people have preserved foods by pickling, salting, sugaring, and smoking. Sulfur dioxide has been added to wine to stop fermentation and solve the problems of exploding bottles and microbial growth. Something I've learned about the hard way. And copper sulfate is used to control mold on growing plants. I don't particularly care for either. There are other ways to preserve and protect, but I still call sulfured grapes. Again, I'm not a big fan of exploding bottles of red wine and raisins whole. That leg of mutton stashed under the thatched roof above the smoky peat fireplace of an old Scottish cottage would have provided whole and wholesome, if tough, food many weeks after slaughter. All right, I'm going to stop there and invite you to take a look at the news articles. One discouraging, two discouraging actually, and then another well-informed article from the Seattle Times.